Hello and very good morning to all of you. So in the today's session of the NDA, we will be understanding and analyzing the newspaper on the dated what? 1st of July. 1st of July. So let's get back to the book. Drone flying toys banned in the J&K district after that. Now you have seen GS पेपर 3. आपके GS पेपर 3 के सिलेबस में यूज ऑफ science and technology in day-to-day life. You can use this example. You can use this example there. Now, you can use this example in internal security. Cyber security. अपने को क्या पढ़ना है इसमें? अपने पढ़ना है इसमें गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया ने ड्रोन रेगुलेशन लेके आए. ड्रोन रेगुलेशन. ड्रोन रेगुलेशन. तो ये ड्रोन रेगुलेशन गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया लेके आई है. हमें इसके अंदर ये पढ़ना है कि कितने तक का मतलब कितने वेट का ड्रोन है, किस तरीके से ड्रोन को कैटेगराइज किया गया है, एंड हाउ दीज ड्रोन्स you have to take the permission through a app while flying these kind of objects. So in that condition, these objects can be considered as threat. These objects can be considered as threat if they are near to some critical installations such as airport, such as defense installations, etc. तो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया की रेगुलेशंस की गाइडलाइंस है, ड्रोन रेगुलेशन गाइडलाइंस. आपको बुक में यहाँ पढ़ना. I'm just giving you direction that you should read these regulations. ठीक है. हेडिंग क्या डालना है? ड्रोन रेगुलेशंस, और डालना PIB, तो आपको ये निकल जाएगा. Now, Supreme Court pulls up the government on X criteria. It gives NDA National Disaster Management Authority 6 week to fix rule for the compensation of the COVID-19 victims. Now, if you see, अपने पास एक है नेशनल डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट एक्ट 2005. नेशनल डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट एक्ट 2005. इस एक्ट के अंदर बेसिकली 3 अथॉरिटीज हैं. एक है नेशनल डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी, एक है स्टेट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी, एक है डिस्ट्रिक्ट डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट अथॉरिटी. ना एनडीए का जो एनडीएमए का जो चेयरपर्सन है वो होते पीएम इज द एक्स ऑफिशियो चेयरपर्सन. यहाँ कौन है? सीएम इज द एक्स ऑफिशियो चेयरपर्सन. यहाँ कौन है? डिस्ट्रिक्ट मजिस्ट्रेट. ठीक है. इसी तरीके से एट नेशनल लेवल एक होती है फोर्स, नेशनल डिजास्टर रेस्पॉन्स फोर्स. एक इसी तरीके से कौन सी होती है? SDR. ठीक है. डिस्ट्रिक्ट के किसी डिस्ट्रिक्ट में हो जाती है, डिपेंड करेगा स्टेट की रेगुलेशंस पर, तो भाई स्टेट ने अलाउ किया है डिजास्टर रेस्पॉन्स फोर्स को बनने के लिए या नहीं. ठीक है. नाउ लेट्स गेट बैक टू द बुक अगेन. तो एनडीएमए जो जिसका चेयरपर्सन है कौन है? प्राइम मिनिस्टर. उन्होंने बोला कि भाई उनको बोला गया है कि आपको 6 वीक के अंदर गाइडलाइंस फॉर्म रूल्स फॉर्म करना है, तो सो दैट कंपनसेशन टू द विक्टिम्स ऑफ द कोविड-19 कैन टेक प्लेस. अपने लिए ये मैंने आपको बता दिया उसके हिसाब से. Notice to Twitter over pornographic content. Microblogging site said it will continue to fight online child sexual abuse. Basically, there is a There is a skirmish between Twitter and government of India. Now, if you see Twitter, when earlier it was a small company, it abided by the Indian government. Whatever government said, the same thing. But now Twitter took a gigantic, took a gigantic form, and now it controls or controls most of the part of the social media. Most of the people's celebrities, they follow the Twitter. So that's how Twitter wanted more, gain its system. Now Twitter is challenging the government. आप इसे जो ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी उसकी तरीके से भी देख सकते हैं। ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी क्या, जब ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी पहले आई तो सबसे पहले कंसेशंस लेते थे, चलो ठीक है, जो औरंगजेब ने कहा हाँ चलो ठीक है, जो मराठास ने कहा चलो ठीक है, जो रंजीत सिंह ने कहा हाँ चलो ठीक है। But when company gained its strength, it carved out India into the pieces. So currently these companies who are having the multinational character, who are having the deep pockets, they are challenging now sovereignty of the governments. Right? We have seen there was a standoff between government of India and the Twitter when Twitter suspended the union minister's account, and Twitter also not abided by the IT rules which are being which have been put place in the public domain by the government. Now, 100th anniversary of founding of Communist Party of China. तो अपने लिए यूपीएससी से यहाँ से तो क्वेश्चन नहीं आएगा that tell about the how China grew in the last 100 years. But a question might come from the Chinese history of China. आपको पता होगा, आपके जीएस पेपर में है, जीएस पेपर 1 वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री. If I talk about the Chinese trajectory of development, is different from the West, where capitalism prevails, as well as the North, where basically USSR was the major force after the World War II. So USSR से भी अलग है trajectory of development की China की, और USA से भी अलग. Now, जब मैं आपको बात करूं थोड़ा सा चाइनीज हिस्ट्री के बारे में, so China was ruled by dynasties, by Chinese dynasties, and it is since ancient they were doing. We have seen, that trade route which passed through the Central Asia and which was originated from China and went through across the Europe, and which is also known as Silk Route. And on this basis, government is also trying to have Belt and Road Initiative. The Belt and Road Initiative is a major project of China, which is based on the Silk Route as its foundation. ठीक है, तो अब चलो मैं एडिटोरियल डिस्कस करूंगा, अदरवाइज ये बहुत बड़ा चैप्टर है चाइनीज हिस्ट्री का. तो आपको क्या पढ़ना है कि वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री में एक बार पढ़ लेना, दैट हाउ USA entered into China, opium war 1, opium war 2. Okay. How Chinese party CPC, Communist Party of China formed, and how Chinese party defeated Japan. How they defeated Japan. Now, if you see currently also, China has its assertiveness. China has its assertiveness, whether it is, whether it is there in the foreign affairs or the international relations or at the domestic front. तो ये कहाँ से आया है? ये बेसिकली आया है नेशनल प्राइड से. अभी डिस्कस करते हैं. We will be discussing about that. ठीक है. तो ये आपको अपने आप पढ़ना है. The history of China. Now next is now इस पूरे आर्टिकल में 4 चीजें बताई गई. That lesson learned by China. Lesson learned by China. Second, how China take pride in its history. How China takes pride in its history. The Communist Party of China on around 1921 में फॉर्म. उसके बाद इनकी जो लीडरशिप आई कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी ऑफ चाइना की, वो आई थी माओ जेडोंग के हाथ में. माओ जेडोंग ने बेसिकली क्या किया? चाइना को खड़ा होना सिखाया. स्टूड अप. फिर आई डेंग जियोपिंग के हाथ में चाइनीज लीडरशिप. उन्होंने चाइना को बनाया रिच. और अभी आई है शी जिनपिंग के हाथ में. सो चाइना बिकेम पावर. आगे माओ जेडोंग के टाइम में खड़ा होना सिखाया. दैट स्टूड अप. डेंग जियोपिंग के टाइम में became rich and China became powerful in the time of Xi Jinping. फिर इसमें बात की है कि CPC's longevity is due to the large measures to its ability to sum up the lessons of history and the change course quite drastically. Change course drastically मतलब जब माओ जेडोंग के टाइम में कुछ चीजें खराब हुई. ठीक है. माओ जेडोंग के टाइम में जब चीजें कुछ खराब होने स्टार्ट हुई तब इन्होंने उससे सीखा. उसके बाद यूएसएसआर का डिसइंटीग्रेशन हुआ तब उन्होंने कुछ सीखा. उसके बाद जब फर्दर तियानमेन स्क्वायर हुआ तब चाइना ने कुछ सीखा. एंड दैट्स हाउ दे इम्प्लीमेंटेड इट थ्रू बाय द लर्निंग. Let's now let's. So how birth of China, new China took place. First major lesson was learned from the colonial era when China was carved up like a melon. इसे बोलते हैं कि जब चाइना को पीसेस में काट लिया गया. हाउ चाइना बेसिकली सारी कॉलोनियल कंट्रीज थी. कॉलोनियल कंट्रीज में जैसे कुछ पार्ट किसे दे दिया गया? फ्रांस को दे दिया गया. कुछ पार्ट यूके के पास आ गया. कुछ पार्ट जर्मनी को दे दिया गया, कुछ पार्ट यूएसए को दे दिया। ठीक है, इस तरीके से सबने अपना अपना इन्फ्लुएंस वाला जो रीजन था वो लिया, and that's how China was chopped up into the pieces. Now there was a collapse of Qing Empire in 1911, which brought up the desired political revolution, and China entered the Committee of Nations. After that, there was an emergence of Chinese Communist Party. Now, when Chinese Communist Party came into the picture, CPC defeated the Japanese forces in 1940s, and then Kuomintang in 1949, and that's how current birth of China takes place. So current birth of China does not belong to 1949, but China always thinks that the birth of new China took place in 1921 when Chinese Communist Party got its birth. Now Chinese always take the pride in their national identity. Now their national identity is with the ideology on which Chinese Communist Party stands, plus their super organizational skills. Their organizational skills can be seen in Chinese military. They are highly disciplined, according to this editorial. Now, when China says that 1949, when Chinese Communist Party defeated Kuomintang, this was a liberation, not mere independence. And the birth of the new China encapsulated in the popular post-1949 slogan, where if there had been no Communist Party, there would have been no new China. ये बेसिकली जब माओ जेदाओ का टाइम था, तो माओ जेदाओ ने इस स्लोगन को बहुत ही लाइटली लिया. He did not pursue much on this slogan, but जैसे ही माओ जेदाओ गए, यूएसएसआर का डिसइंटीग्रेशन होना स्टार्ट हुआ, तब इस स्लोगन को बहुत एग्रेसिवली परस्यू किया गया. Why? USSR was disintegrated. Why? Because there was no nationalistic feeling. Regional feeling overpowered the nationalistic feeling of USSR. That's why USSR disintegrated. But if you see China, they learned the lesson from it, and they says कि if there was no Communist Party of China, there would have been no new China. So it means Chinese Communist Party equal to no new China. That's what they want to say. Now, they, from the Mao Zedong's time, they always stood up against any kind of foreign dominance. China never wants that any kind of foreign power will dictate them their term, whether it is Russia or USA. That's why China was different, and China was not neither in the camp of USSR back then, nor in the camp of USA after the World War II. उसके बाद, at many of the time, Western countries wanted to force the Western value of the China, which China categorically denied, and against such kind of imposition of the Western values, their wolf warrior stood up. Now, when I'm talking about the wolf warrior belongs to the foreign policy of the China, where Chinese ambassador aggressively pursue the interest of China in the other countries. So in India, we call it ambassador, that India's ambassador to Portugal, India's ambassador to somewhere else. But in China, it is the wolf warrior. Now, the second lesson learned by the Chinese from the Bolshevik Revolution. Now, Bolshevik Revolution was confined to the cities. Bolshevik Revolution confined to the cities. But Mao took this Chinese Revolution to the countryside. It took that revolution there in the villages and in the lowermost strata of the society. But the Bolshevik Revolution was mainly confined to the Moscow, mainly confined to the richer part of the country. And the ideology on which Bolshevik Revolution was started was not penetrated to the masses at large. But if you see the Chinese ideology penetrated up to that level that no one wants to question about it. So brainwashing, how that ideas are spreading and they are going deep inside the masses. Now that's why acceptance of Chinese Communist Party increased in China if I compare to that Bolshevik Party in their interest. Now again 1990s के आसपास और 1990s से पहले 1980s में mid 1980s और mid उसके आसपास mid 1980s के आसपास there was a discontent among the population in the USSR. People wanted freedom, people wanted to have development, but development was concentrated to the few regions. People feel exploited, people feel deprived. That's why they want to stood up against that regime in the USSR. But on the other hand, China was growing, and the same thing was happening there in China. In China, political discontent grew, people feel deprived, inequality in China increased, poverty was there on the countryside. The mixture of all these came when this cocktail of these factors come to the Tiananmen Square, which is a place in China where the student unions and the students protested against the Chinese regime. So when the students protested against the Chinese regime, so Chinese Communist Party categorically suppressed this collection of people or protest with a high hand, and when they took a high hand approach on these students, the protesters were dispersed and the protest was was being taken care of. Now China learned a lesson from it, and now what they did? Now Chinese people or the Chinese Communist Party started to talk directly to the people that okay, there was a corruption issue in the Chinese Communist Party, so corruption issue was taken care of. There was issue of inequality and the lack of development in the countryside. That issue was taken care of. Plus, on one hand, they were trying to resolve the issues of the common people. On the other hand, they were slashing the political freedom of the people. Political freedom, like we talk about the right to speech and all. So These all things was curbed on one hand, and second hand people were thought चलो ठीक है अब development तो कम से कम हो रहा है. Now Chinese Communist Party in the governance of Mr. Xi Jinping has clamped down on the political freedom very heavily, whether it is there in the northwest China, where the Muslims are suffering, whether it is in the central China, where the tradition of the people are there. Now, next lesson learned by China is defining the structural transformation of post-World War II international order, where disintegration of the Soviet Union took place. Now, what the lesson they have learned? They have learned a lesson when Chinese Communist Party started to give the slogan that Mao was 70% right, maybe 30% wrong. But you see in the current times, this 30% will convert into the 70%. Means whatever wrong we think today, the Mao did or Mao ideology we had back then, this will convert into the right approach, into the right of this 70%. Now finally, we have the slew lessons spilling out since the China decided to dispense with its low profile foreign affairs. Now you see, after this COVID-19 times, so what actually COVID-19 times China did? Now China aggressively pursued its foreign policy, whether it is in WHO or it is in EU or it is in the bilateral relations of the country. If anyone spoke out against China, that country got punished. Now, for example, Australia was one of the countries who went against the China in the WHO meeting and wanted to have a separate agenda on which the thing should discuss. So, what Chinese did? Chinese banned the import of barley. 1 billion rupees barley was banned to enter in China. And on that pretext, India opened its market to Australia. Why? Because otherwise that barley would have been rotten and Australians got the taste of defeat. तो हमने क्या किया कि चलो ठीक है आपके वहाँ चीजें नहीं सेल हो रही हैं तो आप हमारे यहाँ के सेल. Now, in this editorial, what it says, at what cost China did all this? At what cost? So basically, the cost is nothing, and the outcomes are fruitful. On and around 100 million people came out of poverty in China. In the last year, after this 1949, it is nothing but not more than a miracle, according to this report. Currently, Chinese society suffers from the inequality, but Chinese Communist Party is determined to decrease this equality by allowing the private individual to access the market. Next, Chinese Communist Party is also doing good at the borders. Good at the borders means they are having head-to-head with India. India and China are at the same page when we are discussing about the two issues. One is environment. When we are discussing environmental issues at the international stage, China and India seems to be India Chinese bhai. Second, when we are discussing about the issues in the WTO, these subsidies issues. So in that subsidies issues, India is against the West and China is too. So China plus India are at the same front. I'm giving you from the India's perspective. नाउ नेक्स्ट क्या है, increasing gender imbalance. So there are more number of male than the female in China. The same thing is happening more or less in India as well. In China, there is one child policy. One child policy was having a drawback. And what is the drawback of this one child policy? Currently, Chinese population is aging. The number of elderlies in China are increasing on one hand, but on the other, the Chinese state support to these social measures are decreasing. So again, issue is going on. कि भाई स्टेट तो हेल्प कर नहीं रहा एल्डरली की, दूसरा एल्डरली की पॉपुलेशन बढ़ रही है, तब क्या होगा? सो दिस एडिटोरियल टॉक्स अबाउट दिस ऑल अबाउट द Chinese history and Chinese trajectory of development and the lesson learned by China since its inception. Now, India's 1991 liberalization leap and lesson for today. I have already discussed it, I think, day before yesterday. I have already written one of the articles there on the Plutus IAS website about the LPG reforms which took place in 1991 and the trajectory since then and what Modi government is doing. So let me take you to that. This was the article, reopen the files and reconsider the privatization. So here is history about the LPG reforms. So LPG reforms took place in 1991 and on the pretext that we were not having the enough money to pay our import. India was having less than 1 billion of the foreign currency, which could have give us only 1 week supply of oil. So what India did, India wanted to have much more foreign currency. So India went to IMF, भैया हमें पैसे दे दो, मेरे पास पैसे नहीं है. So IMF told कि चलो ठीक है भाई, पैसे तो हम आपको दे देंगे, we will give you money. But you have to do certain things. So certain things was nothing but the arm twisting. So the arm twisting by IMF to India, though that arm twisting helped India, but again compulsion is compulsion. I will not say it was a measure in the good belief, rather than yes, I will say it was an arm twisting. So the IMF on one hand gave the money to Indian government, on the other hand asked them to open their market. Now India did not open its market. Why? Because since Nehru era, we were very cautious about foreign intervention in India's market because we were already being colonized on these type of the pretext by the East India Company. So we did not wanted that any foreign country come and have too much access to Indian market and they have their hand and the word to say in Indian politics. So Nehru wanted to stay away from all kind of these dramas. So he took up the socialistic pattern of society when Congress declared it in its Avdi session in 1955. So अब हमने क्या किया 1955 से हमने क्या किया कि भाई हम अपनी इकोनॉमी को ओपन अप नहीं करेंगे, इंपोर्ट नहीं करेंगे, इंपोर्ट का सब्स्टिट्यूशन ढूंढेंगे, एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे, बट एक्सपोर्ट लेड ग्रोथ नहीं करेंगे. We will take consumption, we will give or we will have the consumption based growth. तो इन सब के लिए गवर्नमेंट ने मैन्युफैक्चरिंग पॉलिसी, ट्रेड पॉलिसी डिसाइड की और उसमें बेसिकली क्या किया गया, उसमें बताया गया कि भाई कहाँ इंडस्ट्री लगेगी, where these industry will be located was decided by Government of India. What should be the production of that industry? How should they produce? How much they produce? This all was dependent by Government of India. If any foreign country wants to invest, they have to take any number of permissions from the Government of India. Now, this is how the Inspector Raj came into the picture. Inspector Raj means whenever there is a factory, the factory will be visited by an inspector, and inspector will do inspection, and through that inspection, if he found that कि भाई company overproduction कर रही है, company सही काम नहीं कर रही है, company is not doing according to the law, then there will be a bribe, and again there will be dose to the exchequer. तो इस सब की वजह से करप्शन भी बढ़ा, इकोनॉमी भी अच्छी नहीं चल रही थी, जॉब्स उतनी नहीं थी. तो चलते चलते हम आ जाते हैं 1991 में. 1991 में बिकॉज ऑफ इंपोर्ट, हम एक्सपोर्ट हमारा बढ़ा नहीं, इंपोर्ट हम होने नहीं दे रहे, इंडिया में टेक्नोलॉजी आ नहीं रही. इस सब की वजह से क्या हुआ, इंडिया के पास हमारा जो फॉरेन रिजर्व है वो डिक्रीज हो गया, और जब फॉरेन रिजर्व डिक्रीज हो गया तो अपने पास उतना फॉरेन रिजर्व था नहीं कि हम एक वीक से ज्यादा ऑयल की सप्लाई कंटिन्यू कर पाते. इंडिया चला जाता IMF के पास, जैसे कि मैंने पहले भी बताया, भाई चलो अब हमें पैसे दो. सो अब जो IMF ने आर्म ट्विस्टिंग की, आर्म ट्विस्टिंग की वजह से हम लेके आए LPG पॉलिसी 1991. तो जो LPG पॉलिसी आई 1991, इसमें बेसिकली व्हाट आर द मेजर्स गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया टू? फॉरेन टेक्नोलॉजी एग्रीमेंट्स, फॉरेन टेक्नोलॉजी एग्रीमेंट्स अलाउ कर दिए गए, फॉरेन इन्वेस्टमेंट अलाउ किया गया, MRTP एक्ट 1969 को अमेंड कर दिया गया, ठीक है, और इसे बाद में आके स्क्रैप कर दिया जाता है, और 2002 में आ जाता है कंपटीशन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया. It is a statutory body which came through this Act of Competition Commission of India. उसके बाद industrial licensing was deregulated. There was beginning of privatization. Beginning of privatization means कि कुछ इंडस्ट्री होगी गवर्नमेंट की, PSUs, अगर वो प्रॉफिटेबल नहीं है तो भाई एक काम करो उन्हें बेच दो. अगर वो कुछ PSUs प्रॉफिटेबल है तो एक काम करो उन्हें थोड़ा सा रिलैक्सेशन दो मैनेजमेंट में, सो दैट दे कैन डू गुड लाइक दैट. अपॉर्चुनिटीज फॉर द ओवरसीज ट्रेड, कि भाई चलो एक काम करो बहुत ज्यादा एक्सपोर्ट करो ताकि इंडिया के पास पैसे हैं. स्टेप्स टू रेगुलेट द इन्फ्लेशन मींस डिक्रीज द मॉनेटरी सप्लाई, increase the autonomy of RBI. Why? Because earlier inflation target was set by the government and there was no statutory target. According जो इंदिरा गांधी ने बोल दिया ठीक है, जो राजीव गांधी ने बोल दिया ठीक है, और जो जवाहरलाल नेहरू बोल दिया ठीक है, ठीक है. The tax reforms के लिए आपको पता होगा टैक्स रिफॉर्म्स के लिए एक टार्क पैनल भी आया था उस टाइम, ठीक है. बैंकिंग सेक्टर रिफॉर्म्स के लिए पैनल्स आए थे, एंड नरसिम्हन कमेटी 1, नरसिम्हन कमेटी 2, ये भी आए थे. और अबॉलिशन ऑफ लाइसेंस परमिट राज, मतलब अब लाइसेंस नहीं देना होगा आपको इंडस्ट्री लगाने के लिए. सो देयर वर फ्यू इंडस्ट्रीज इन व्हिच लाइसेंस वाज परमिटेड. इन दैट, फॉर एग्जांपल लिकर इंडस्ट्रीज, दिस टाइप ऑफ, और केमिकल इंडस्ट्री जिसमें लाइसेंस चाहिए होता था. अदरवाइज MSME के लिए आपको लाइसेंस नहीं चाहिए होता. What is liberalization means? LPG में liberalization L को represent करता है. So liberalization refers to slackening of government regulations. Now what are the reforms in the liberalization? Deregulation of industrial sector, financial sector, tax reforms, foreign exchange reforms, trade investment policy reform, external sector reforms, foreign exchange reforms, and the foreign trade policy reforms. आपको क्या याद रखना है? आपको याद रखना है भाई एलपीजी रिफॉर्म्स आए थे, कब आए थे? 1991। लिबरलाइजेशन का मतलब है कि आप जो भी आपकी रेगुलेशंस थी, अब आप उन्हें लिबरल बनाओ। आप लोगों को आने दो, लोगों को जाने दो, इंडस्ट्री को आने दो, इंडस्ट्री को जाने दो। इसे बोलते हैं लिबरलाइजेशन, मतलब आपने अपनी मार्केट को ओपन कर दिया। प्राइवेटाइजेशन means government will have the few areas in which government will do the business. Other sectors will be left upon the private कि भाई आप करो, हम नहीं करेंगे। For example, why government will do hotel business? Why government will do the will make cigar, will make that that agarbatti and all. Let why government will make furniture. Let the private sector will do, because private people will have expertise and they will have more exposure than the government, because everything cannot be controlled by the government and everything cannot be produced by the government. So liberalization and privatization and globalization. Globalization means integration of Indian economy with the world economy. Whatever will happen in the world will ultimately happen to India. Again, positives are there for the globalization and negatives are also there for the globalization. So I will say, what is your work is? Your work is to find out the positives of globalization on India. Now, though it is a society topic, but still I want you to explore it more. How? Look at the effect of globalization on women, effect of globalization on agriculture, effect of globalization on industry, effect of globalization on SC and ST, or effect of globalization as a society of whole. Now, if you see, there is McDonaldization of Indian society. People eat too much McDonald burger, and our Ayush sir is one of them. Ayush sir eat too much McDonald burger. So what is Ayush sir and Amit sir is doing? They are taking the Western food. How? Because of the globalization. They got to know, okay, in Paris pasta is there and they like pasta. How they got to know? Because of this globalization. Simple. So we are living in so-called Pakka Makan, the concrete houses, the concrete buildings. From where this concept came? Concept came from the West. अपने पास तो ये थे नहीं, अपने पास तो झोपड़ियाँ थी. Full ventilated houses. Though you may counter this argument with the Indus Valley civilization, but still with the current phase, medieval era, I can say yes, this tall building with a less ventilated space, with a full air conditioning, came from the West. Now, let's understand what in privatization government did. Transfer of ownership, disinvestment, public sale of shares, public auction, public tender, direct negotiations, and etc. Let's understand the effects of LPG reforms. पहली बात तो क्या कि free flow of capital. Liberalization has improved the flow of capital into the country, which make it expensive for the companies to access the capital from the investors. Stock market performance, अभी आप देखेंगे what is the share market is doing. कि चलो ठीक है, आपको लगता है अच्छा, एक काम करो, टेस्ला के शेयर में इन्वेस्ट कर दो. Let me give you one important statistics. In the last 1 year, the Tesla share increased on and around 8-fold. Tesla share on and around 8-fold. It has increased more than what digital currency would have increased. But Digital currency is increasing. On what scale or on what speed? This Tesla is increasing much more. Fine. So let's understand next. तो ये कहाँ से पता चला अपने को? Stock market से. Political risks are reduced. Diversification of investors came into the picture. Impact on agriculture, both are positive. We can access the GM seed from where? From Monsanto. Monsanto is a company of Canada. Why? How? Because of liberalization and globalization, we let the Western companies enter into the Indian market, and through that we are accessing their technology, their products. Though it has a bad impact too on the environment, we have seen too much hot in Delhi, which is one of the outcome of the so-called climate change or the greenhouse effect. Again, negative impact of globalization. क्योंकि जो भी Western countries करेंगी गलत, they will have to go on top of that. For example, these coastal countries and the islands of Indian Ocean or the others. Example, one of the study which says that within the 50 years, if we will not do anything about the climate change, we have to take all Andaman and Nicobarese population on the Indian's land. We have to migrate them from Andaman to India, and look at the devastation it can have. Again, why? Because of the globalization, negative impact. Lack of political interference, yes. Increased competition. पहले अपने पास सिर्फ वेस्पा का LML स्कूटर हुआ करता था, अभी आपके पास n नंबर ऑफ एग्जांपल्स हैं. आप चाहे स्कूटी ले लो, आप चाहे डिफरेंट स्कूटर से लो, कुछ भी कर सकते हैं. Increased employment. Now earlier I would have been there on the offline class, whether it was COVID or not, but abhi I'm taking the class from the Plutus IAS, and in the meantime I would have been the opportunity to be work from home, to have the work from home. Example of increased employment, increased compensation. हाँ भाई पैसे तो बढ़ी नहीं, no doubt. High standard of living, extension market, development infrastructure, and development of healthy competition. These are the positives of healthy. Now look at the thing what Montek Singh Ahluwalia is saying. He is also saying the same way कि भाई 1991 से पहले जो हमारी जो ग्रोथ रेट था वो ऑन अराउंड 5 के आसपास था, बट ड्यूरिंग दिस 1990 आफ्टर द 1991 रिफॉर्म ऑन एन एवरेज अपना जो ग्रोथ रेट है वो है 7%. ठीक है. उसके बाद इंडिया प्रोग्रेसिवली लोवर्ड द इंपोर्ट टैरिफ फ्रॉम एस्टिमेटेड 57% in 1992, 8.9% in 2008. But this trend has reversed over the few years, while this appears to be in the line with the rising protectionism globally. Can India afford to do this if it wants to play a greater role in the world trade? So he said some political statements. I will not go into that. So if you want, you can read this particular interview. Fine, but this reading of this interview should be with the taken care of the history of LPG reforms, which I have already told you. Fine. तो ये इंटरव्यू आप पढ़ सकते हैं if you want. Otherwise आज के लिए एक और न्यूज है. This news is all about the Google removed 59,000 almost posts in April. Now, if you know IT rules, I have already put up an article over the Plutus IAS website. In one of my current affairs, I have already comprehensively covered all the IT rules, issues in those IT rules. So what Twitter is saying, what other companies are saying, what Indian government say, and why should we regulate these medias. Fine. So we have seen a number of examples of Twitter is doing. For example, recent case of the Ghaziabad, where Twitter got the notice from the government of Uttar Pradesh on that, on the issue of the communal inharmony. So this is all about the today's newspaper. We will meet tomorrow with the 2nd of July newspaper, I hope. I hope you like the class. If you want to give some kind of suggestions to me, please do let me know in the comment section. Otherwise, we'll meet tomorrow. Goodbye, good luck, take care, and stay away from the COVID.